All right, we're bringing it back round. I'm going to actually take us back to our definitions that we, stop sharing that for a minute, our definitions that we had created in class at the very beginning of all of this. If I can find it. Week 6 was clearly all drafting. All right, as a reminder, disinformation are denotations or false information deliberately and covertly spread, as by the planting of rumors in order to influence public opinion or obscure the truth. False information intended to mislead, especially propaganda issued by a government organization to a rival power of the media. Boy, that bugs me that that's misspelled. False information is about a military's strength or plans disseminated by a government or intelligence agency in a hostile act of tactical political subversion. And type of untrue communication that is purposely spread and represented as truth to elicit some response. False information spread in order to deceive. The deliberate and purposeful distribution of false information. Let's just pause that for a second in case I need to let somebody in. Nope. Guess I'm good. Okay, so those are our dictionary definitions. Our connotations that we had discussed at the beginning of this unit were this. Connotations, things we associate with disinformation. Propaganda, politics, media, rumors, fake news, freedom, as in like First Amendment rights, etc. Fact checking, Facebook and social media. So we had really kind of like vague thoughts about disinformation. I imagine we've sort of solidified those a bit into something even more useful. So now that we have thought thoroughly about disinformation, if I can ever click on it again, what things do we associate with it? What things do we place as being related to disinformation, to be understood as disinformation? What is it like? What is it dislike? That's kind of where I'm going with us today. And I want us to make a much larger list so that we can start thinking about where your paper might go and what leads into disinformation you have an interest in. So let's start brainstorming. And anything more specific about that? Because we had that in the beginning and we have it now, right? Do what? All right, what else? Satire is protected speech, right? Like humor, that kind of thing. Disinformation is not. you can be held accountable for libel or slander, right? But satire is protected. What else have we started thinking about disinformation associating with it? That's really a big thing that before I did this unit, and this is the first time I've done this unit in this way, that I personally didn't know about disinformation, is that it's often anonymous. So we don't know the author of it, and is spread by an anonymous person, right? A lot of times. It seems like the less personal it is, the more likely it is to be disinformation, doesn't it? Okay. What else did you gather? Where does disinformation come from? Trolls. We got trolls. We got bots. We have cyborgs. And we have meme makers. Okay, all good. How are we combating disinformation in our society? How are we working actively to figure out what's what? Avoid the echo chamber. But the echo chamber is so much more enjoyable, Joey. Independent fact checking, avoid the echo chamber, absolutely. And I think, interestingly, like recognizing that there are people out there who simply exist and make disinformation to divide us makes me want to fight against that. You know what I mean? I don't want to be manipulated, right? I don't want to be manipulated by disinformation. I don't want to be manipulated into being or feeling divisive. And I think that's helpful as well. So awareness, right, is also good. Okay. It can originate from anywhere, right? But the reason we see so much related to Russia is because of what? People who read the one article. Disinformation.
It's like with these and stuff, not spelled like this.
Well, we'll figure that out. That article, the title of the article. And the Internet Research Agency, right? The IRA, I believe it was called, right? So the purpose of much disinformation is to divide and polarize people, right? Get them angry without much else, right? Because they're not getting angry to like go become an activist or something, right? They're just making them mad. And anger without action is just rage, right? So some disinformation is really, really hard to tell, right? The troll accounts thing was probably the hardest to actually tell what's real and not. Pictures, videos, those are easier to fact check, aren't they? Memes. It's clear that some disinformation is a lot harder to figure out than others. That just makes me think of that song. Gosh, what is it? Something about nobody has got a body like you. Whatever that song is, it's like from the 90s. Gosh, I can't remember it is. Oh, and I definitely just recorded that. There you go, Gina. All right, something else that I've been focusing in on from those denotations is that word deliberate, right? Disinformation is always intentional, right? And I think that was something that I had to figure out as I was reading more often than not, that it is intentional, right? And that's huge, right? It's not like misinformation where you can correct, you can fact check, you can take care of things, you can be like, oh, because we're Midwestern. Disinformation is intentional. What else did you take from this about either the connotations or denotations that you might like to look at even more closely? Do you think disinformation is put out by governments or citizens or and I'll amend that to say job, right? Some of these are paid jobs. Well, I think in the United States, we do have journalists who are paid specifically for disinformation. But as somebody who hopes and aspires to journalistic ethics myself, I think sensationalism does end up paying more, but ultimately fact checked, it gets shut down, right? However, if your job is to just spew out tons of disinformation, like just massive amounts of it, you can see how that could be lucrative. Let's see. Anything else? So I'm going to ask this question, and this is one that I think people have really wavered on opinion, and I'm really curious as to hear your thoughts. Something I've been seeing a lot is, I said the other day, everything does have a bias, but we can do our best to try to figure out what that bias looks like, how it operates, and do our best to try to get the best objective information possible. I am of the opinion that it is possible to know what is true. Or at the very least, it is possible to know facts. However, I felt like in the past, I'm going to go 8 years, that this mindset has changed significantly. I do have some friends who are like, facts shift and the truth shifts. Therefore, we never have the ability to know the truth, but only to know the truth right now. And I find both of those ways of thinking interesting and compelling, right? But ultimately, I am of the opinion that we can know things. What do you mean by that? Because I'll write it down, but so I guess the question is then, if the truth does shift, how does it shift? If it shifts by public opinion, then I'm going to go ahead and say that it's not truth. Okay, I'm just going to take a quick poll, and it doesn't matter at all. But knowing full well that everything does have a bias, is it possible for us to know the truth about things in our world, in our media? And I'm not talking about like religious truths. I'm talking about simple truths. Is it possible, or is it impossible because of the clouded waters? How many of you would say that it is still possible to know truth, or it is still possible to figure out facts? How many of you say our current situation has made it impossible? We can't know, even as we're trying really hard to know. I think both of these positions are valid to us as we try to figure things out. At the same time, I think sometimes people tend to, because there's so much disinformation muddying the waters, to not want to do the hard work of wading through it. We don't want to do the hard work of fact checking. We don't want to do the hard work of stepping out of our echo chamber. We don't want to do the hard work of examining our own biases. And when we are willing to do that hard work, we are helping people to understand what is true, what is information versus disinformation, what is intentional versus unintentional. And so I'm really glad you did this media literacy unit, because you're such an intelligent group of young people that I truly believe you're the sort of people who are going to help others figure out what's real and what's not. I genuinely think that. I think the boomers need you. You will save them. And on that note,